In January 2026, China executed 11 people from a single criminal empire, including the founder's son and his granddaughter. At its peak, the family business had 10,000 workers. Many of them, according to the court, had been trafficked or were being held against their will. This is the story of the four families of Kokang, and how one of the world's largest digital theft machines was built, protected, and finally torn apart. But here's what you need to understand first. The thing that broke this empire wasn't a police raid. It was 4 gunshots fired inside a compound called Crouching Tiger Villa. Kokang is a sliver of land in northern Myanmar, pressed right up against the Chinese border. Most people there speak Chinese, trade in Chinese yuan, and for decades, the region ran on casinos. Real power belonged to a handful of clans: the Bai family, the Wei family, the Liu family, and a rising newcomer, the Ming family. These weren't shadowy gangsters hiding in basements. The Bai family's patriarch, Bai Suocheng, had been the region's top official. Ming Shuichang sat in a state parliament. Their relatives commanded the local border guard force, a militia aligned with Myanmar's military. They had government titles, private armies, hotels, and construction firms. On paper, they were the establishment. And around 2015, according to Chinese court findings, the Ming family discovered a business far more profitable than casinos. It didn't need gamblers to come to them. It could reach into any phone, in any country, on earth. The business worked like this. You build a walled compound. The families called them parks. You fill it with thousands of workers, give them phones and scripts, and have them spend months charming strangers online. A wrong number text, a friendly chat, a budding romance. Then comes the pitch, a can't-miss crypto investment on a platform that shows beautiful, fake returns. Victims deposit more and more. Then one day, the app stops loading and everything is gone. Investigators call it pig butchering. Fatten the pig before the slaughter. If you're watching this in the US, the UK, Canada, or Australia, this is not someone else's problem. In 2024 alone, Americans reported $5.8 billion in losses to exactly this kind of crypto investment fraud, over 41,000 victims, with people over 60 hit hardest. In 2025, reported losses climbed another 24%, past $7 billion. A research institute founded by the US Congress estimates fraud networks in this one region of Southeast Asia now take in more than $43 billion a year. Some of the messages sitting in your spam folder right now were typed inside compounds like the ones in Kokang. But here's the darker layer, the one that turns this from a financial story into something much worse. The people typing those messages were often victims too. Workers were lured to Kokang with fake job ads, then locked inside the parks. The UN Human Rights Office estimated that across Myanmar, as many as 120,000 people may have been trapped in operations like these. Inside, people were treated as inventory. In a televised interrogation, one senior Wei family figure described Chinese workers as the industry's most valuable resource, saying the going price for one had risen from 20,000 yuan to over 300,000, and that workers who wanted to go home had to pay a ransom first. Chinese courts later found that the Ming syndicate and its partners beat, detained, and in some cases killed workers who resisted or tried to escape. 14 Chinese citizens died in connection with the group's operations. According to the verdict, 10 of them workers who disobeyed or tried to flee. So the obvious question, everyone could see the compounds. The lights were on all night. Why did nobody shut them down? The answer is about who was holding the umbrella. The families operated inside territory aligned with Myanmar's military government, and their militias were officially part of its security structure. The leader of a rival ethnic army has accused the military of providing armed protection for a fraud hub he claims generated $14 billion a year, an allegation the junta denies, but one that sits beside an awkward fact. Senior family figures had received honorary titles personally conferred by Myanmar's military leadership. Inside that bubble, the families were untouchable. Chinese police couldn't cross the border. Victims' families could only post desperate appeals online. Then came October 20th, 2023. Crouching Tiger Villa, a Ming family compound. According to the court, the family had been tipped off that a raid was coming and began moving workers out under armed guard. Somewhere in that chaos, guards opened fire on detainees, on people from China. 4 died. Some, according to Myanmar reporting, may have been undercover Chinese security officers, though that detail couldn't be independently confirmed. And that, it turned out, was the line. Defrauding the world for a decade was tolerated. But the deaths of Chinese citizens, on the wrong side of a border crackdown Beijing was already preparing, changed everything. Within weeks, China issued public arrest warrants for the Ming family's leadership, with bounties on their heads. Days later, Ming Shuichang, the 70-year-old patriarch, reportedly took his own life in custody in Myanmar. His son, his granddaughter, his relatives, and dozens of associates were eventually handed to Chinese police. And then the dominoes really started falling, because at almost the same moment, the families lost their territory itself. On October 27, 2023, an alliance of ethnic armed groups launched a massive offensive across northern Myanmar, Operation 1027, and one of its loudest justifications was wiping out the fraud parks. Within months, the military lost Lokang, Kokang's capital. The family's protection evaporated. In January 2024, Myanmar's regime, under enormous pressure from Beijing, handed over by So Cheng, Wei Chaoren, Liu Zhengxiang, and other clan leaders to China. The men who had run a statelet were now defendants. The trials came in waves through 2025. In September, a court in Wenzhou ruled on the Ming syndicate. Dozens of defendants convicted of fraud, illegal detention, intentional homicide, and more. In operations the court valued at over 10 billion yuan, about 1.4 billion US dollars. 11 were sentenced to death without reprieve, including Ming Guoping and his niece, Ming Zhenzhen, the founder's granddaughter, who'd taken charge of the family after Ming Suichang's death. In November, a Shenzhen court ruled on the Bai family, fraud-related sums exceeding $4 billion across 41 compounds and 6 deaths. Bai So-cheng, the former Kokang chief, was sentenced to death and was separately convicted over roughly 11 tons of methamphetamine, but he died of illness before any execution could be carried out. Several co-defendants appealed. The higher court and then China's Supreme People's Court upheld the sentences. And on January 29, 2026, the executions were carried out. 11 from the Ming case and 4 leading members of the Bai family, including Bai Suocheng's son. One caveat worth saying out loud: these were Chinese courts, and nearly every detail we have comes from court statements and Chinese state media. There was no independent reporting from inside those courtrooms. The convictions are real and final, but the full picture we may never see. The Wei and Liu families came next. The Wei clan was put on trial in 2026, and the Liu family's case entered prosecution. Prosecutors allege the Wei operations caused multiple deaths and involved billions of yuan in fraud and gambling money going back over a decade, but those cases are still before the courts, so for now, they remain allegations and every defendant is presumed innocent until proven otherwise. So, problem solved? Not even close. And this is the part that should worry you. The compounds in Kokang went dark, but the industry didn't die. It moved deeper into Myanmar's borderlands, into Cambodia, into networks Washington is now chasing. In late 2025, US prosecutors unsealed a landmark case against an alleged Cambodian fraud empire, seizing Bitcoin they valued at $15 billion, the largest forfeiture action in American history. The man at its center denies wrongdoing. His case is still being fought, and even the question of how the US obtained that Bitcoin is now disputed. America has since launched a dedicated scam center strike force, and in March 2026, the White House signed an executive order targeting these networks. China used executions. America is using indictments and seizures. The fraud so far has outrun both. Because here's the uncomfortable math. This industry exists wherever there's a weak state, an internet cable, and a supply of desperate workers, and in this region, it earns more per year than the entire formal economy of some of the countries it operates in. 4 families fell in Kokang. The machine they helped build is still texting strangers in Ohio, Manchester, and Sydney tonight. So I'll leave you with the question governments are quietly arguing about right now. China answered this with death sentences. The West is answering with sanctions and court cases. Which approach actually stops it? And would you accept the Chinese version if it protected your savings? Tell me what you think in the comments.